Better. Hi, happy 4th of July weekend. I'm Elaine Brewster, and this is Aspects of Energy, a place where we learn ways to raise our energy. And today, celebrating the 4th of July, we have Bob Deschner, who works with veterans. And he works with something called Vet Trip, Veterans Team Recovery Integrative Immersion Process. They use innovative methods such as EFT, which has been talked about on some of our shows earlier, therapeutic massage, Reiki, Qigong, music therapy, I'm all over that, acupuncture, chiropractics, other things to relieve stress and chronic pain. And their company says, or their group says, we are committed to honor and empower veterans and their families. So I'm very, very excited to have Bob Deschner with us today, talking to us about veterans that he's known and about this wonderful work at Vet Trip. So I'll just hand it over to you, Bob.
Well, thank you, Elaine. I appreciate this opportunity to share with your group. I grew up in a veteran family. I did not serve, but I have uncles, grandfather, first cousins, and my nephew just got accepted into West Point. He just got there a few days ago.
Wow.
So it's something that helps your perspective on the military and military culture to have veterans in your family, because there's just a different perspective on everything as a result of that. My partner Dottie is not a veteran either, but she has a father and others in the family that were veterans. So we were looking for ways to use energy type techniques, whether it's EFT or magnets or Qigong or Reiki or any of the number techniques, with veterans. And we were focusing on high pain, because when you get the neuropathic pain, there's not a lot of treatments that work. Energy is particularly good at that, and when it's applied appropriately. But we quickly found out that a lot of the veterans were having trouble with PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder. Many of them didn't have a diagnosis, so we called it post-traumatic stress. It's about 20% of them have PTSD, diagnosed or undiagnosed. About 50% of them have requests for treatment for pain. And if morphine doesn't work, it almost guarantees you it's neuropathic pain, which tends to be more acceptable, amenable to energy techniques. I personally am not a medical licensed healthcare provider. I started out in chemistry and chemical engineering, but I look at the human body much in the way a scientist does and as an engineer does, and looks for ways that we can get an effect, a beneficial effect, hopefully, but avoid the negative effects. Early on, we found that the Nikken products worked, and they worked very well, but they tended to overstimulate. So you had to learn techniques to help them out. But I will tell you that when I first came into Nikken, I was completely skeptical. I'm an engineer, as I said. I knew there was no interaction with the human body in the magnetic field. I'd been taught that, I presumed that. And the first meeting I went to, they had Lieutenant Colonel A.J. Myers, retired Air Force. And it's actually difficult and emotional to talk about it because he made such a major impact on my life, but he himself had debilitating, horrific injuries. He was shot down over Vietnam in 1966. He was broken leg, spondylolisthesis in his back, 75% offset. He basically had a spinal cord that was crushed to a ribbon, and in horrible pain, 3.5 years as a POW, 18 months of that he was tortured daily. I came up to him not knowing all this at the meeting, and I said, if these products are so good, how come you're still hobbling around here? And he looked me straight in the eye and told me the story. And I don't think he had told more than about 4 people the story outside of his debriefing when he was recovered. And I just stood there crying. You can't be impacted by somebody that's gone through that kind of impact on their own lives without being affected by it. And one of the techniques we developed, by the way, is to put the back of the hand up against the right side of the neck. And that allows you to process emotional trauma, whether it's a PTSD attack or anxiety, or in my case, getting emotional telling a story. So I'm actually using one of the techniques that we developed for veterans right now, but I'll talk about it more later. In telling me his story, he convinced me that something had happened. I didn't know what, but in 2 weeks, he didn't hurt. And after 20 years of agony, after 3.5 years of torture, I knew that there was no magic. There was something fundamental had shifted, had changed. So I, of course, pursued using the magnets. And I quickly found out that it's about a third of the cases, it's easy to overstimulate people in high pain. So I developed techniques that allowed you to use the magnets and get very fast results on the order of 5 to 30 minutes without overstimulating. The other part of that was detoxing. If people are backed up in their circulation, they have a lot of edema or swelling, if they have smoking or exposure to hydrocarbons, they would tend to get worse as they were flushing these toxins out. So it's a very straightforward process. It can be very complex. So you had to give them time to flush out. And we developed techniques to do with detoxing as well. So everything I was doing was using the magnets. I started in 1994 with Nikon. I got gold in about 18 months. I was platinum in about 24 months. And our whole entire organization was doing what AJ Myers said. I don't care if I make a dime from this. I just want to help people. I'll do this the rest of my life for that reason. So even though I'm not a business builder in Nikon right now, I still use the products, and I still use the products with our veterans because they fit a need. They allow them to get, if used properly, continuous improvement, and many of them start to recover, and a lot of them have recovered over time. But when I was doing this, I realized that things were going faster with me. Sometimes we get results in a few minutes when it would take other people longer. And I finally met somebody who was a yoga practitioner and said, let me show you about energy, because you're interacting with the energy of the people you're working with. I use the Magboy a lot. I could use it slow spinning, fast spinning, get different effects, calm it down with slow spinning or slow back and forth, and then speed it up to get a stimulation. And you just alternate back and forth and find which one they like best. So during this time, I was training all over the country. So I was having doctors and healthcare professionals and distributors bring me their worst cases, the people that they tremendously wanted to help but couldn't help. And I quickly showed them how to get the best results. And so that's where we got started. Our goal was to go to veterans that were having no help with traditional medicine, medications, counseling, and show them here's something that might work. Of course, we couldn't make any medical claims at all. It was more or less, hey, here's something you can try. If it works, you're welcome to purchase it. Or I had donations from people. I actually donated product to veterans. Out of the first 3,000 people, we got results with all but 2%.
Wow.
That seemed to be kind of the standard results. If you know how to handle detoxing and you know how to handle overstimulation, it was easy to get fairly fast responses. But with the yoga techniques, I was able to get even better. And then later get a training in Reiki. And I went through 4 levels of training in Reiki in less than a year because I was already using the techniques without knowing what they are. And every culture on the planet, dating back thousands of years, in India, they had energy healing with yoga. In China, they called it Qi or Qigong. In the Philippines, they call it prana energy. In Japan, they call it Qigong or Reiki or Qi energy. Every culture, even the Christian culture, have laying on of hands. So it's a universal interaction between people. It's a universal interaction with energy in the nervous system and the biochemistry of the body. It was separated in Europe over time because the Catholic Church thought that that should be their area of expertise. And they separated chemical and biochemical and physical from the spiritual and the energetic. And that was the Descartes schism back in 1320. So it dates way back in the Middle Ages or the Renaissance interface, where people were doing hands-on healing during this time. They just had a different way of explaining it. In China, they talk about yin and yang. In American and Western medicine, we now talk about the sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous system. Stephen Porges came up with polyvagal theory, a third branch which was the unmyelinated parasympathetic, and that was the freeze response. So the sympathetic nervous system has to do with the fight or flight response. It's also the panic response. It's also physical exertion in sports and performance. The parasympathetic is the rest, digest, relaxation. For a long time, they thought that was the freeze response, but it's not. It's distinctly different than the third branch. That also happens to be what Porges calls the socialization response, the fact that you can breathe and talk and communicate with your face all at the same time is a very sophisticated reflex. And he called it the socialization response, which was based on the parasympathetic response. It allowed mammals to get together and fight off lions and tigers, or the primates getting together and communicating and forming teams that would then defend the tribe. The third part is the freeze response, and it's very fascinating to explore that separate from the rest of it. For example, the freeze response happens when you have shock, and you can have somebody with horrific injuries with no pain. You can also have a pathological response to shock where it starts shutting down the nervous system. So you have to understand that like the fight or flight, the fight or flight, are the rest, relaxation, digest. It's across organ systems. And so is this shock response or this freeze response. It tends to highly medicate the body with endorphins, the innate morphine-like compounds that are throughout your nervous system and can turn pain off. It's also the basis for ecstasy, whether it's religious or sexual or enlightenment or any of the other descriptions that they've historically talked about. When you get somebody in that state, they feel no pain. And there's another aspect of it. If you get them totally relaxed after being consumed with terrible agony, when they're in this state of profound relaxation, it resets their nervous system and they literally feel no pain. So that's what we were observing when we started doing vet trips. I'll back up a little bit and tell you a little bit about our vet trip programs. We started out doing tapping technique, EFT. I know you've all heard about that with others. We had a lot of practitioners that were Reiki practitioners, but they didn't get a lot of acknowledgement or credibility with the medical profession. We did, however, have acupuncturists and chiropractors and massage therapists, all of which were licensed medical professionals. So it was a matter to see how we could bring these different modalities together in a strategic way to get the best response. So we started out with tapping and aromatherapy because they would remove the triggers or dampen or calm the triggers for these people that were walking the door with high pain and terribly high stress. Then we would bring them in groups. In fact, we went through the tapping and whatnot in groups in 4 to 8. We'd take them into the treatment room in groups and we'd have tables set up. We'd have 8 to 16 massage tables. If we were accepting 4 an hour, we would bring in 8 tables. If we were accepting 8 an hour, we would set up 16 tables. And it was a 2-hour process. We'd start out with getting them comfortably adjusted on the table. We would do energy work like Reiki and Qigong, then massage, then chiropractic, and then acupuncture. And what we quickly found out is instead of having an hour for each one of those modalities, we could compress that in about an hour and a half. The Reiki and the energy work would tend to calm things down and reduce the neuropathic pain. The massage then could be done on somebody that was relaxed and in not much pain. So it went very, very fast in getting the relaxation, the flexibility, and all the other benefits you get with massage. And then we would do chiropractic, and the chiropractors would do just adjustments with the activator because they were already totally relaxed, and the activator would do whatever they needed for adjustments. And then we would go to that, allow the acupuncturists to come in. Instead of taking 45 minutes to an hour, where they'd put needles in and then adjust the needles after 15 minutes, and then another 15 minutes to go deeper, they could place the needles fairly deeply from the get-go, and in 15 minutes, they were done with their session. So we found a tremendous utility in working together with these veterans. And I will back up a little bit and tell you, we didn't come up with this. We based what we did in a 2-hour session with what they did at Fort Bliss and Fort Hood with the integrated treatment programs that were founded by John Fortunato at Fort Bliss, the Reset and Recovery Program, and Dr. Jerry Wesh, who had the Combat Stress Reset Program at Fort Hood for 7 years. What was amazing with those programs is that they were incredibly successful, and both of them were shut down over a period of time for whatever reason. The military just didn't know how to implement it. But the Fort Hood study was done before they shut down. And out of 1,400 soldiers with combat PTSD, and like I say, many of them had pain as well, they only had 10 soldiers walk out. And if you've ever done anything with PTSD, the traditional treatments of prolonged exposure therapy and cognitive processing therapy, even EMDR and techniques that are now accepted along those lines, tend to be very traumatic for the veteran. There's a high incidence of re-traumatizing, and frankly, there's a high dropout rate. It can be as much as 60, 70%. And even the best programs have a 30+% dropout rate. So we found that based upon what we did at Fort Hood, where they did relaxation several times a week with massage, with Reiki, with acupuncture, they didn't have chiropractic, but they did counseling in between. They would recover from the counseling and get better so that they'd be better prepared for the next counseling session. So that's what evolved from what we did. We would have these 2-hour sessions with the veterans that they get fairly quick improvement for 2 days to 2 weeks. They get counseling session every week, and then they'd come back to Vet Trip and get another session. And we found out that people that dropped out of counseling or who had not ever wanted to go to counseling would go to counselors and say, "Doc, I need to talk about these things." Totally transformed the clinical relationship. And many of them told us that the counselors told them they only had to, after 6 sessions, they were done instead of 10 or 12. They literally were done in half the time. So we integrated what we were doing with the Team Recovery Integrative Immersion Process. We called it the IIP, or Integrative Immersion Process. We integrated what we were doing with what the traditional VA and vet centers were doing with their counseling, with their medications. And many times they found out they could withdraw the medication without much problem because they're already at low pain. They found out that if they needed counseling, they went through it fairly quickly and they were much more responsive. So you didn't have to have 4 sessions in counseling to get a benefit. The day they walked in the door, they were already getting benefits and they were open down to it. So we started this in Houston, Austin, Texas in 2009. We did 4 sessions then. We did whole day sessions. That was really too much. We tried to do a week's worth of work in 1 day. It was still very well received by the veterans. We came back to where we lived in San Antonio in 2012 and started. It took us 3 years to get going in San Antonio. And when we got started in January of 2012, we actually had some of those original people there that were Reiki and massage and acupuncture and chiropractic still with the program. Here it is, 2021. We were able to keep them for 9 years. First 3 years is 100% massage, 100% volunteer. Everybody, the massage therapists, chiropractors, acupuncturists, energy workers were all volunteer, as well as Dottie and myself. After that, we started to get donations. We filed some grants, and then we more or less doubled each year for 2 more years. And we got up to treating, having 2,000 sessions a month, treating 40 new veterans a month, or having an $850,000 budget with $150,000 cash. 80% of our budget was in-kind services and facilities use. We were able to help over 3,000 veteran service members, their families, and caregivers during that period of time. We did over 10,000 sessions, and we have data on that. And we're in the process of compiling and evaluating that data statistically so we can actually publish it. We've gotten 1 publication in a peer-reviewed journal that was qualitative in military medicine 2 years ago. And so we think we're well on track for establishing a credible treatment that's going to be accepted, because over half of our veterans that come in the program are referred by staff at the vet centers and the VA and the DOD facilities here in town. The summary is that 70% of our veterans came in the door with pain and stress levels higher than 7. That meant that they had not gotten adequate relief from medications and counseling and surgery and all the wonderful things that the VA does. I would point out that we couldn't exist without the VA doing their job, providing that evaluation, diagnoses, and treatments. And if it's injury pain, they need morphine, and we don't provide that, or any medication for that matter. So they need that to allow us to then step in and say, if it's not working, let me show you some things, and let's try together to see if it works. So we've been doing that since 2012. We had to take a hiatus because of the pandemic. The restrictions shut down our churches. We were at 4 churches across San Antonio, New Braunfels, and Houston. And we just had to sit back. We're still doing some things over the phone. And what's really neat about this is that one of the techniques, several techniques we've taught, we put on our YouTube channel. And this one in particular, we call the Vectrip Salute. It calms down the sympathetic nerve on the right side, the vagus nerve. And by doing that, it calms the panic response, sometimes the start in a minute to 5 minutes. So I was teaching people how to do that in combination with 2 points here on the head. This point right here is the left prefrontal lobe, and that's where depression, when you're deficient in circulation here, you tend to be depressed. And this point right at the apex of my head, left of center, is in active pressure called something like the awareness point. So I'll do this combination. We call this a Vectrip Salute, and it tends to run energy from the left side, which is the parasympathetic side, to the right side, which tends to be the anxiety side, the sympathetic side, and calms it down. And you can do that with open mouth breathing. Literally in that short a time, you can see a shift in their body and language and their anxiety levels, and they can talk better, they can think better, and they can do that multiple times a day, as I did while I was starting to speak and got emotional. One of the greatest things that came out of that happened to us 2 months ago. And that was, I got a call from a dear friend who was a business marketing professor at 2 of the universities here in San Antonio. She had a successful marketing career in business, and she decided to retire in Mexico. So she moved down to Mexico before the COVID thing happened. And she called me out of the blue one Wednesday evening and said, my fiance, my boyfriend, this man I met down here in Mexico, turns out he has PTSD from childhood trauma. He was present when they had a horrific small airplane crash, and he helped them recover people that were dismembered and in terrible trauma. And he's been haunted by that his entire life. So when he gets around crowds, it just freaks him out. And they'd gone all day out with groups out on the beach, and then went to a bar for a restaurant to eat, and he had a panic attack. And I said, well, is he there now? And she goes, no, he's out walking the dog. That seems to calm things down. I said, good, I'm glad he found some techniques to cope. But when he gets in, keep me on speakerphone, I'll introduce myself, and I really want to know what he's found that works, because obviously he's already doing things to help him cope with his PTSD. So when he came back in the door, he was kind of defensive. He didn't want to really talk to a stranger, as you can imagine, and especially in front of your girlfriend, right? And he was saying, I really have it handled. I said, well, tell me, because I'm always looking for good things. And he said, my counselor in Canada taught me to use the back of my hand on the right side of my neck, and that takes care of it. I was blown away. I said, what counselor, who is doing this? Turns out there's a hospital that treats people with alcoholism and PTSD. It's a civilian hospital. It's in Ottawa, Canada. And this PhD counselor, psychologist, uses it with all the people with PTSD. So here's a Canadian civilian in Mexico talking to my friend who's a civilian in Mexico, and he somehow got hooked up with this technique that allowed him to get results. And he didn't care where it came from or what it was called or that it was energy work. He just used it because it worked for him. That's ultimately what the possibility is. Our veterans are learning healing techniques. And what you're going to find out is that they're very sensitive to energy because that probably is how they survived on the battlefield. That's probably why they were most susceptible to things like post-traumatic stress syndrome. And by showing them the energy techniques, as long as you don't call it something that they are not ready to accept, you just say, try this technique, it seems to work. It blows their mind. Now they have another technique. It's something they can do, just like exercise, just like deep breathing, just like mindfulness. All the other things that they've acquired to help them cope with whatever it is that they're struggling with, they now have techniques. Before I open up for questions, I'll also tell you another technique. You can go to our YouTube channel, Vet Trip, on YouTube and see some of these in videos. But the second technique we call the parade rest. I don't know if the camera is going to show this very well, but I'll stand up and turn around. This position, you've all seen it, whether you're a veteran or not. You've seen people standing in this position. It's called parade rest. So we call this the Vet Trip parade rest. If you use the back of the hand, it calms. So when you're standing at parade rest, you're literally calming your back and increasing circulation down your legs and enhances the ability to stand for long periods of time. So you start out with 3 slow breaths. Open mouth breathing stabilizes and supports the parasympathetic nervous system. And after doing 3 slow inhale exhales, you turn your hands around. You do it while you're sitting there. And this time, putting your hands on your hips or your back or whatever feels good that you can reach comfortably. And you take 3 slow deep breaths and you allow it to warm up. You're energizing. In Qigong, the first thing you do is unblock, then you energize, and then you rebalance. And then the third thing you do is you put your hands on your knees. Again, you can't see this, or you can point to your finger or to your feet with, this is called sword finger in martial arts. That's knife finger, that's sword finger, and it extends the energy from your hands down your legs until your knees and your feet turn warm or feel better. If you'll do that, usually in 2 to 5 minutes, your legs feel better, your back, your hips, your knees, your feet. And I have a lot of people that do it before they work out, after they work out, or just while they're sitting around all day and they're hurting in front of the computer, they can do that, relax their back and get the circulation down their legs. Ideally, they have a seat cushion with magnets in it. Ideally, they'll use some magnets to help enhance that effect. But that's 2 of the basic techniques that we use with our veterans. Of course, they hurt so badly, we do it for them initially. But after 2 or 3 sessions with immersion process, we're able to have a group meeting where we teach them how to do some of this stuff. We calm them down for 30 minutes instead of 2 hours. Then we do some group meditation. We do a lunch together, showing them how to eat healthy food. And many of them become quite buffs for coming up with recipes that seem to work and changing their lifestyle as well as their diet. And then in the afternoon, we have an education process and then have a meditative meditation and music class. And so they're there about 4 hours. And that's magical. There's something about 4 hours. We observed that early on. It didn't work in 2 hours or 3 hours, but at 4 hours, there's a shift that goes on. And this is really state-of-the-art neurology research. This came out of a group that was headed by Dr. Joe Ledoux. And Joe had mapped the fear response in the brain. He wrote a book called Fear in the Brain. And it took him 40 years to do that. We can do it in about an hour now with all the new technology. But he found out that when you have this fear response, it shuts down your prefrontal lobe. The amygdala is in the midbrain here in the limbic system. And when that activates, it turns the blood circulation down in the frontal lobes and you can't think. You're literally not talking to anybody that's reasonable or logical. If you want to see that work in action, try to tell somebody that you're having an emotional argument with, would you please calm down and think logically? It doesn't work. You can try it. Doesn't work. That's because this part of the brain is turned off when you're emotional. So by doing this, you can calm that down. And so we're using these techniques based upon the theory to get the kind of results. But one of his researchers said, I think there's a lag effect. Joe said, no. I actually heard him telling this at a presentation in San Antonio at the medical school. And he said, there's no research to support it. It's a waste of your time. Well, unbeknownst to him, the post-grad student went and did the research. And he found out there was an induction period. It takes 4 hours for the neurons in the brain to release a protein out of the nucleus, out of the DNA of the nucleus, and express that protein, and it allows you to calm down, profoundly calm, normalized calm, and it takes 4 hours. So another research group in Amsterdam decided they'd check that out. So they took 30 patients that had arachnophobia. They were terrified of spiders. I mean, when you have arachnophobia, this is the scream and jump on the table as you see a little spider crawl across the floor. These people could not go into the room where there was a spider in a big plastic case with a huge padlock on it. So this big tarantula just terrified them. Many of them, most of them could not even walk into the room. So they brought them back the next day. They showed them the spider, went to the next room, and they did a propranolol drip. Propranolol is a beta blocker. It blocks the adrenaline in the sympathetic nervous system and turns it off. Very powerful beta blocker. And they put them on an IV beta blocker for an hour, no benefit. 2 hours, no change. 3 hours, no change. At 4 hours, some of them went back in and opened the box and petted the tarantula. To me, it's a neat confirmation that the research has a practical application. This right here, Eugene Lipoff, a neurologist anesthesiologist in Chicago, was working on a former Marine who had severe neuropathy down his right arm. Thankfully, it was his right arm because only it works on the right side in 85% of the cases. And he was taking a 4-inch needle with Marcaine, which is like lidocaine, and was sticking it in the neck, trying to find the place to block the response for the pain. And he finally found it. And he said, does that work? And the Marine said, yes. And he says, is the pain gone? He says, yeah, the pain's gone. And so what are you talking about? He says, the PTSD's gone. So if you want to have a 4-inch needle kind of poked around the right side of your neck, you imagine what that Marine was going through and freaking out, and it turned it off like that in 30 seconds. They're now doing the research to show that 70% of the people that have PTSD, military combat PTSD, it's turned off, even if nothing else helps. It's turned off in 70% of the cases, and it lasts 2 to 6 months. And the Army and the Navy and the Marine Corps, the Navy's doing the medical for the Marine Corps, of course, are finding that and documenting that. We just do this. And nobody asks why it works. It just works. If it works for them. Turns out 15 to 20% of people have the vagus nerve descending on the left side of the neck. So you have to do the other side or just do both sides. And you can do both sides any way it's most comfortable. I don't even know what to call this. We would call it Qigong because the technique of unblocking and energizing is Qigong and rebalancing. But the fact is, it's just parade rest. It's just veteran salute. And that's going to lay the groundwork for them to come back and go, okay, tell me more. And now we have these wonderful veterans that are back in the program, training to be Reiki practitioners, training on Qigong, and going out and showing other veterans how to get results like the civilian that came from Canada. We're allowing warriors to become healers. And I think it's going to transform their lives and the lives of their friends and family, and hopefully get big enough to transform everybody's lives. That's what we do.
Mm. We're
Elaine,
thrilled with this.
are you there? Okay.
Yeah, we're just thrilled with this, Bob. It sounds like It's almost like another occupation, you know, another place in life now that they can go. They can go to a healing place rather than, you know, being the tough guy and the warrior.
We're getting now at least 35% of the referrals are from other veterans.
I bet.
I think that's even more impressive than having the staff of the VA and the DoD recommending and the vet centers, because veterans trust other veterans, and if it doesn't work for that person, they're going to tell everybody it doesn't work. So our confirmation it works is it works better than 90% of the people walking the door report a beneficial improvement in pain and or stress.
Wow. So now post COVID-ish, are you able to start up again?
We're literally starting this month. We're having a meet and greet and welcome back on the 3rd week of July. And the 4th week, we're doing our first get together with our staff and reminding everybody the techniques we've been working. It's been a year and a half. And we have some new techniques and new protocols to try to reduce the number of contacts. We usually would have 6 or 8 people work on each veteran. We've gotten it worked out where we think we can do it with 3. We're going to drop the chiropractic for the time being. We'll have an acupuncturist there, but everybody will do an energy work and acupressure and massage and massage type manipulations. And we're already gaining results with it, so we know it works. So we'll start that in August on a limited basis, half days. And then as everything goes smoothly, we're going to bring on new locations. We have a new location that has fewer restrictions. It's called the Endeavors Agency in San Antonio. And then we're going to go back to the churches. The churches are all calling and saying, when can you start? We love the program. So it's kind of neat being in a military town. 14% of the people are veterans or active duty. So that's the highest percentage in the United States. I think it's second highest in the United States. So it's quite a veteran culture. Half of the families in town have a veteran member or active duty member. So
I bet when you see this high amount of people who are benefited, that you wish that there were other people who were doing this program.
We want very much to duplicate. We started very early on, much like a network marketing company. It's all about duplication, right? So I trained a lot of people with magnetic products and infrared products while I was actively building a business with Nikon. I'm not doing that now, but I'm using the same principles of teaching people to teach others. And that's why it was so exciting to me to see that civilian from Canada tell me, you know, the path, how I don't have the path filled in yet, but the path to how he came to using one of our techniques, because nobody else is doing that technique. That technique, I've never heard anybody talk about doing it on the right side for those reasons and get the kind of results we get. So everything, I mean, we give it away. Go to our YouTube channel and you'll see many of the acupressure techniques for the back, for the neck, the knees, the feet. And, you know, if they don't work, try another set. It's really a way to get in touch with your own body and your family and friends, and then let them do it with themselves and others. Touching is a universal way of healing.
Now, just everybody notice that Vet Trip has 2 I's, Vet, TRIIP, because it stands for Veterans Team Recovery Integrative Immersion Process. So there are 2 I's in there when we go to the site.
Sure, I'll tell you why we have a team recovery. Early on, we had a Marine that was working with us, and he said, "You know how to calm down Marine?" I go, "No, I'm always open." And he says, "You're surrounded with other Marines." So the first sessions we did were in open rooms with groups of Marine and other veterans that were in the room, and the doctors swore it wouldn't work. And when they got done, they came to me and said, "I'm humbled. I had no idea. This is the most incredible thing I've ever seen in my entire life." Because as long as there were other Marines in the room, they were good. They'd put up with anything almost.
Wow, this is fabulous. You've really opened our eyes. Does anybody have anything you'd like to ask Bob? I think we're all just sitting here with our jaws dropped and, you know, just agaga at at this wonderful thing that you're able to do for veterans. This is really wonderful, especially this time of year. I went to a lady that was a distant relative, and we have big fireworks. We have one of the biggest parades in the country, and it will be starting again this year on Monday morning. But all the fireworks, he had to just hide himself down in his bedroom and just hope that it could hurry and get over with. You know, he couldn't take that.
That is exactly the type of person that if you'll try just this, either hand, back of the hand, ideally on both sides, if it's that 15, 1 out of 6 that you needed on the left side, it's going to make a difference, especially if they do some breathing with it, and especially if you'll do that. It just works so fast. And I do it with people walking down the street that are emotional, accident or something like that. It's kind of like first aid. And when our veterans and our staff come back and tell the stories about, I wasn't sure, but I tried it, and sure enough, we got results. So, that's what it is. It's a universal thing. And it's really the pathway in to get people to learn all sorts of things, whether it's Reiki or massage or Qigong or any other laying on of hands. If you do it with a connection that's spiritual, like with laying on of hands, it's particularly profound. And I'll give you another little tip. If they don't want to do it yourself because they resonate with you. You don't have to touch them. You don't have to have them touch it. Just by doing it yourself. Can you imagine a room with 30 practitioners and 16 veterans on tables all doing this kind of work? The energy in the room is just phenomenal. I'll give you another tip, how to get veterans to try new things. They won't do it for PTSD. I mean, they're very defensive. You don't understand. If you're not another veteran, you don't understand. Trust me, I'm not a veteran and I can't understand it. I've seen it, observed it, I'm accepted, but even then, I've not been there. Right. So do it for the pain relief. They all have pain, and pain is not emotional. It's not that big of a trigger. Tell them, we got these techniques and it seems to help the pain. So, we do parade rest. Well, they all know parade rest. In fact, they'll laugh about it. I said, how long have you been on this position for 6 hours or more a day? And they go, you won't believe the number of times I've stood at parade rest for 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 8 hours. Start them out with that. Help their back feel better. The knees feel better. It calms the rest of the body a little bit, and then move to the salute. The second thing is, they won't do it for themselves, but they'll do it for a buddy. So ask them, who do you know that really needs this? Would you and another buddy come check it out? I want you to see if it works well enough that it might help your buddy. And they'll volunteer to help their buddy almost every time.
Yeah.
So do it for pain relief, do it to help a buddy, and it's not as threatening.
Yeah.
And if you can ever get a veteran that gets results with it, have the veteran do it.
Wonderful. May contact information for,
I put mine on there. Can you see mine in chat? Bob Deshner, BD at vettrip.org. Okay, I'll put it back in.
Yeah, I can see it.
Now, let's see how you type. Okay, there we go. Any other questions? I've been trained in yoga, Reiki, Qigong, and I've picked up energy techniques on just about every type of energy. Everybody shares what they know. So anything that works, we quickly find out it works and we start using it. So if you have some Niken products of the old fashioned and you want to contribute to VetTrip or make a donation, you can go to the web page and either ask for info or an address to ship it to, or you can donate on the Donate Now button. It's on that front page, the website.
And I did that last year and had a bunch of things that, I had too many things that I didn't need. And that made me really, really happy. In fact, that's the first time that I met Bob. That made me very happy that I had a place where I could donate, and it's tax deductible also.
You have no idea how big a gift it is for these veterans, because they're used to being either told by doctors you have to take these drugs, and many of them have taken 20, 30, 40, 50, 100 different types of drugs. But to have them get a benefit and then hand it to them and say, you've earned it. And they're trying to come up with money. I had so many stories. I had a lady with stage 4 cancer, and she literally took her purse out and pulled all the cash and all the pennies and said, this is the only thing that's helped me in 4 weeks. I mean, these veterans are incredible. I have the greatest respect. I'm honored and humbled every time they allow me to be able to work with it.
Wow. Well, we are honored to have you tell us about them today. And what a start to our weekend. Thank you so much, Bob. And thank you.
Welcome, veterans.
Yeah. Go and have a wonderful 4th of July. And
Absolutely.
I think this weekend you're going to be with probably a lot more people than usual. So give that radiant smile that you have to everyone and help to raise everyone's energy. Have a great weekend, everyone. Thank you so much, Bob.
Thanks, folks.
Okay, bye.